Now it's time for our U.S. Report regular, former White House Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor at Bondi Partners, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, great to have you here. Been looking forward to this chat because I want to know what you thought about Ron DeSantis' campaign launch and if you think that this whole interesting way of going out on a Twitter space is going to play well for him.
Yeah, James, very interesting. I listened to the whole thing last night. It's a real shame that the glitch has become the story. I've talked to some of the DeSantis people here in the last 24 hours, and they're a little disappointed in that that's what's getting the attention now. DeSantis, I thought, did a really good job. He talked about why he did what he did with Disney, why he did what he did with this supposed Don't Say Gay bill, why he did what he did on COVID. It was a really good presentation on substantive issues by somebody running for president. We don't have nearly enough of that in this country these days. But the glitch is getting all of the attention, and it's probably inevitable. If they rolled the dice going in with Elon Musk anyway, I can't believe that Musk and Twitter didn't test this beforehand. But at the end of the day, it's probably not going to make that big a difference. He did get a good news cycle out of it beforehand. They had a huge audience on Twitter, and they've got a lot of media coverage today. So they'll move on now. I think he leaves for Iowa tomorrow or this weekend, and the campaign for him will at least get started in earnest.
Now, a little earlier in the program, we heard from somebody who said that Ron DeSantis' focus on his war on woke and what he did with Disney and everything isn't necessarily going to connect with Trump voters he needs to bring back across to win the nomination. How is he going in terms of explaining his broader bread and butter policies to Americans?
Pretty good. I mean, Ron's a pretty straightforward kind of guy. The criticism of Ron is not that he's not smart. He's extraordinarily bright, very articulate, can explain himself. Again, that's what he did yesterday. He answered straight questions with straight answers. And that's a rarity, again, on both sides of the aisle in politics and not just in my country. But I don't know if I necessarily disagree that he's got to get into other topics. Keep in mind, James, and you know this as well as anybody, you followed politics as long as I have. These are all Republicans, right? Everybody in the Republican primary is a Republican by definition. Most of their policies are going to be the same. Primaries are won and lost primarily on style and personality. And if Ron DeSantis can convince people that he's a better candidate, more likely to win the presidency than Donald Trump, then he's got a chance. If he can't get out of Trump's shadow, if people look at the two of them and go, as between the two of these, I'll take Trump, then Ron is going to struggle.
Yeah, and of course, Trump, as you would expect, has made no bones about taking advantage of the perceived glitches and so on in the Twitter thing. Just have a look at this little thing that he put out there on social media. Comparing it to one of Elon's blown-up rocket ships there. Does this show that Trump is rattled or threatened by the Ron DeSantis push into the race?
Rattled, probably not. Trump doesn't get rattled. He is certainly threatened. Keep in mind, when I talked to the DeSantis team today, they said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, let me see. You're being attacked by Trump because he thinks you are their biggest challenger, and you're getting attacked by Biden because they think you are his biggest challenger." So he's in a good spot. There's a saying in politics that you don't take flack unless you're over the target, and he's taking flack from both Biden and from Trump. So he's in a pretty good spot. He is by far the leading challenger to Trump, but it wasn't the best rollout. Again, the fact that we're seeing that video, and that's the commentary. That on Saturday Night Live, our big nationwide comedy show on Saturday night, they're clearly going to be making fun of the tech. You just showed sort of a takeoff of an internet meme with George Soros. There's going to be a lot more of that. And that's what people are going to remember from this night, and not what Ron DeSantis said about Disney or COVID.
But now, Trump had a very different response to Tim Scott's announcement that he is running for president and wished him well, wished him good luck. What does this say about Tim Scott and how Donald Trump is thinking about him? We've talked a lot about him in the past as well.
Yeah, what he's saying is that Donald Trump does not yet perceive Tim Scott as a threat. If he did, he'd be attacking Tim Scott the same way that he's attacking Ron DeSantis. Remember how Trump did it in 2016? He identified Jeb Bush as the leading Republican and went out and attacked him. And once he was out of the way, he then moved on to Marco Rubio. And then he moved on to everybody else. He went Chris Christie, Ted Cruz. He did it one at a time. And that's what you would expect him to do again. Honestly, I think that as between all of the candidates, Tim Scott is going to be the most difficult for Trump to sort of pin down. He can't cast him as disloyal because he doesn't know anything to Donald Trump, unlike Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley or Mike Pence. Plus, he's just a genuinely nice human being who's led a pretty upstanding life. So I'd be curious to see if it does come to that, and it might not. Tim Scott might not get any traction. If it does come to that, be curious to see how Donald Trump tries to treat Tim Scott when he's so different than all the rest of the candidates.
So, Mick, you have followed and been a part of politics at the very highest levels. What is it, or how is it that the Republican Party, in the midst of this cage, it's going to be a cage fight, between DeSantis and Trump here, how do they prevent tearing the whole party apart before they go to the general?
They don't. Everybody faces that to a certain extent. But listen, the best question that no one's asked yet is that if Trump loses in a primary to Ron DeSantis or Tim Scott or Nikki Haley, would he ultimately support that candidate for president? And let me tell you, the answer is unequivocally no chance. There is no chance. The only question I think for, say, if DeSantis, if he wins, is can he convince the voters that would have voted for Donald Trump to vote for him anyway, despite Trump's opposition? But Donald Trump is never, ever, ever going to support another Republican that beats him in a primary for president, period, end of story. That's going to be the challenge. That's one of the many challenges that Republicans face. And one of the reasons I think the smart money is still on Joe Biden being the president again 2 years from now.
Well, that seems to be, that's a real problem, though, because you've got Trump and DeSantis both beating Biden. But what you're saying then is that those locked-on Trump voters aren't going to be like other Republicans who are going to say, the ones I'm talking to are saying, I will vote for Trump, I will vote for DeSantis, I don't care, I just want Biden out. That's where the split is, isn't it?
There's certainly an element of that. And the question is, how many folks are there? And as I said just a second ago, would Ron DeSantis or Tim Scott or Nikki Haley be able to convince all those hardcore Trump MAGA voters, look, we know your guy's against me, but it's still important for you to vote for me because we can't have Joe Biden. That's going to be the pitch that they have to make. It's going to be much harder, is my point, than it would be if Donald Trump would do what most Republican primary losers do and say, I will support the candidate. You can do it and you can win and you can beat Joe Biden. I actually think there's a pretty good chance of beating Joe Biden, but they'll have to do it without Donald Trump's assistance.
So finally, then, on the Democrat side of the equation, in the Biden camp, are they feeling a little bit more quietly confident about going to the general with Joe Biden for all of his faults and all his flaws now?
Sure, because they think that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee. Keep in mind, Trump is still the prohibitive favorite to be the Republican nominee, and that's what the Biden team is hoping for. Keep in mind, Joe Biden's first, second, and third qualities, the first, second, and third thing he's offering the voters is, I'm not Donald Trump. That worked for him in 2020. My guess is the odds are in his favor that it works against Donald Trump in 2024. The question is, what is Joe Biden if Donald Trump is not on the other side of the ballot? What does Joe Biden have to offer when he's saying, I'm not Donald Trump if he's not running against Donald Trump? That's what the Democrats are really worried about. That's why you're seeing the Democrats attack DeSantis, because they have nothing on Ron DeSantis like they do on Donald Trump.
Mick Mulvaney, thank you so much for your insights as always, and we'll speak next week.